Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us one of the most accomplished musicians on the scene today. This gentleman has been around for over 40 years and has worked with many greats from Vaughn Freeman to Thad Jones, Abbey Lincoln, Jack DeJohnette, Cassandra Wilson, and Sting, to name a few. He's a saxophonist, composer, educator, and band leader. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, the legendary Mr. Steve Coleman. How are you, brother?
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Man, it's so good to have you on. You know, as I just mentioned before the show started, you're one of my favorite musicians, man. You've been around for quite a while. Now, I understand that you're from Chicago originally, right?
Yep, born and raised. Yep.
Yeah. So many great musicians, man, have come out of Chicago. I was talking to one of the horn players of Earth, Wind, and Fire from the 70s, the Phoenix Horns. I got him coming up and we were chatting. But I'm interested in knowing more about your humble beginnings, man, and how this got started. Now, I understand that you come from a pretty good, big family. And originally, your instrument was violin. And you switched to saxophone. And there was
Right.
a lady named Diane Ellis that was
Right.
responsible Tell me about that whole thing, man. I found that very interesting.
I don't know if I would call it responsible, but yeah, I started off playing violin. I went to South Shore High School, which had a very good music program, and we had a band teacher named Alvin Lawson. And Alvin Lawson studied with Captain Walter Diet, who's legendary in Chicago for all these musicians, Vaughn Freeman, Gene Ammons, Johnny Griffin, you know, and all these great musicians who came through his program at DuSable High School, you know. So my band teacher went to that high school, and then he taught us using that same system that Diet taught him, you know. And I also studied for a short time with Diane's uncle, a guy named Jimmy Ellis, you know.
Jimmy Ellis.
Yeah, saxophone player in Chicago and everything. And he also came through the Diet system. They were all connected to Captain Walter Diet some kind of way. So basically, through osmosis, I was receiving this tradition kind of secondhand through the people, you know, because Vaughn Freeman and all these people, they also went through Diet, you know. So I started off in high school playing violin. It was kind of an accident because nobody in my family is a musician. And I kind of stumbled into it. You know, they put me in orchestra by accident almost, you know. And then I saw Diane playing the saxophone and I thought it was cool. I was too shy to talk to her, you know, and everything. So I thought if I played the saxophone, she might notice me or whatever, you know.
Right.
So that's kind of how that got started. But she was also inspiring me musically because she was a better player at the time. I mean, I couldn't play at all, in fact, you know. And so by the time I got into my sophomore year, I switched from violin to saxophone, and then that just kept going, you know. And the Chicago music scene is very rich. It has a lot of blues and Vaughn Freeman and them are doing what people call jazz, I guess, and there's a lot of like R&B elements and all this kind of stuff. All of that stuff was around. There's a lot of live bands and everything. So I just soaked up like that whole scene. I didn't discriminate. I was trying to do music in all the different genres.
Interesting. Yeah, Steve, now you were saying that I heard a story, you know, your father was a big jazz lover and he would play a lot of Bird, Charlie Parker in the house. Now, I'm sure you were listening to this at the time you were probably going to school. So you probably had Bird's solos and his music in your mind, even probably before you picked up the instrument.
I did, but I didn't like
it. Are you serious?
No,
you didn't like it?
I like it now, yeah. But when I was younger, we called that music old people's music. That's what we called it. We didn't call it jazz. It was the music that when my father and his brothers, my uncles and everything, they got together at the house and they started playing cards and bin whisk and they start, you know, talking to each other and everything. That's the music that would be playing in the background. You know, Diana Washington, Charlie Parker, Ray Charles, Billie Holiday, you know, Lester Young, all that. That music would be playing in the background. I didn't know anything about that music except to know that the people of that age group were listening to that music. That's all I knew. So we called it, well, this is the music that the older people listen to. Because we were listening to like Motown and James Brown and all that stuff that was happening in the 60s when, you know, I grew up, you know. So I wasn't a musician when I first heard this music. You know, it was just, I heard all these songs and I knew them from my father playing them, you know, Ray Charles and stuff like that. I knew the songs, I knew what they sounded like, but I didn't pay any attention to it, you know. Later, when I became a musician and I decided to learn how to improvise, that's when I went back and looked at that music, you know, and then everything started to make a connection because I'd heard it growing up. I'd heard everything. And so all of the sounds started making a connection with me. Say, oh, I remember this. Yeah, they used to play this when I was little, you know, and I found myself knowing songs that I shouldn't have known, you know, because I would hear like, I don't know, what a difference a day makes, or something like this. I was like, well, I know this because my mother used to play it all the time, you know. I mean, and so, you know, a lot of things like that happened that were, I don't know if the word is serendipitous or what, I don't know what the word is, you know, but things that, you know, were recalled from my childhood came up, you know. And then my father actively promoted because he wanted to see me succeed in music. So he pushed me. He would go to the Von Freeman sessions with me when I was first trying to.
And I was about to ask you about that. I guess when you were getting together, playing that horn, you were going to these jazz clubs and checking out Von Freeman, who had a tremendous effect on you. He seems like he was really instrumental, you know, in the early part of your career when you were getting it together. You were checking him out. What was it about Von and some of those other guys during that time that really, you know, captured your attention, or what were you learning from these guys?
Even now, man, Von is still a huge influence on me, and I'm still checking him out. But I went to see Sonny Stitt one time, who was in Chicago so much we thought he lived there, you know. So I went to see him play, and Von was on the bill with him. That's how I met Von. You know, Von was on the bill with Sonny Stitt. They were doing like a double saxophone thing, you know.
Yeah.
So, and Von came up to us, as me and a bunch of young guys, like really like 18, 17-year-olds, you know. And Von came up to us and said, well, if you guys want to play, I have this session on the South Side. You should come by my session and you can play. Now, what he was really doing was trying to get us to come and listen and learn. But
right.
He I mean, you know, he had a lot of experience. He knew he couldn't approach us like that because we were young and, you know, bullheaded and all this kind of stuff. And we just wanted to play, you know. And so he appealed to our egos and said, you can come and play. But then when we play, he would make us sit there and listen, you know, for a while, you know, I mean, and everything. So it was his way of teaching us. You know, I mean, he didn't say it, you know, but at the time he knew what to say, what he needed to say to get us there, you know. And then once we got there, we were forced to sit and listen, and then little by little we realized how good they were, you know. But I didn't go there to listen to him. I went there to play, and after a while I realized how great he was, you know. And so then I kept coming back and listening, and he became like one of my my biggest living influence, in fact. You know,
that's incredible. That's incredible. You know, one of the things that really impressed me about you, man, I guess mid 70s when you made that move to New York, you must have been really, really hungry and focused because, you know, I understand you get there, you're staying at the YMCA, you're playing on the street. And how did you meet my man, Mr. Haynes, the trumpeter, Roy's son? Yeah.
Roy Haynes' son.
Yeah, Grant.
Yeah, I met him at sessions, you know. I mean, we would play sessions at different places in Harlem and different places downtown and stuff like this, you know. And we would start talking because, you know, you would hear a person who could play and you all talk. We would talk to each other, say, hey, man, you know, you can play. It's great. You know, I mean, where'd you learn how to play from and this and that? So he told me he's from New York, told me his father was Roy Haynes. And of course, I knew who Roy Haynes was, you know.
Right,
and so I was like, oh, this cat's like, you know, royalty. You know, it's like, you know.
Yeah.
And so then we started talking and everything. And we started discussing, sharing ideas, you know, like what I liked, what he liked and everything. And we hooked up. We still talk, you know, we still talk today. Me, Graham, Lonnie, all these cats, you know, we still connected, you know.
Yeah.
And so, so we started hanging out and going to all these sessions and everything. And then we formed a street band. I was playing on the street by myself alone.
Right.
And we formed a quartet. It was me, Graham Haynes, and two brothers, the Johnson brothers from Milwaukee. You know, they were in New York, Mark Johnson and Billy Johnson. You know, Billy Johnson played bass, Mark Johnson played drums, you know. And so we formed a group that played on the street, you know, like a quartet. You know, they played on the street and everything. And then that transitioned. Eventually that band was the roots of Five Elements, my group now. You know, it was the roots of that. So this was like, oh man, this is like 79 or something like this, you know. And at the same time, I was like playing with I had auditioned for Thad Jones' band because one of my goals was to hook up with Thad Jones. I mean, I knew about this cat. I knew about his brothers. You know, I knew about the whole Detroit scene and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, man, this guy was, and here's the thing that you might not know. My three mentors at that time, my main three mentors were Von Freeman, Thad Jones, and a guy named Sam Rivers on saxophone. You know,
of course,
you know?
Yeah.
Now, they're all born in 1923, you know, so they're right between Bird, who was born in 20, and Coltrane, who's born in 26. You know, they're like right between, you know, they knew both of them, you know. And so so they were like my windows into that time period, you know, because Sam and his wife would tell me how they had Charlie Parker over for dinner and they would do this. And then Von would tell me stories about when he played with Bird and different things. And so they were like the people who I got like a lot of the information from because they were from that time period. Thad would tell me what Duke Ellington was like, and I would bug him with questions like, well, how did Duke write? How did he learn how to write? And, what was Basie like? What I had all these questions for them from all these people that influenced them. Vaughn would tell me about Fats Waller. He'd tell me about Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, just all these stories, And so it was like a very, very rich thing because these were the cats who were there.
Yes.
Who helped develop this music. And they walked among all the guys that I listened to on the records and everything. For me, I was like in cloud nine. I was like I met Jay McShann, who gave Charlie Parker like one of the first gigs, and I played with him. I met Slam Stewart, played with Art Tatum and all the
great bassist.
Guys, So I mean, for me, it was just every day was like it was like I was learning something great. I played with Ray Brown. I played with all these people. And so and these were to me the cats. When I played with that, I got a chance to play with. We backed up Sarah Vaughan one time.
Didn't you when you got that gig, Steve, with that? Didn't that turn into some type of like a 2-month or 8-week gig thing or something for you? You guys went on a tour or something like that?
Tour 10 weeks.
Wow.
The tour was 10 weeks in Europe. It was like a shock for me because I had never. I'm gonna tell you, man. I'm gonna tell you something about me. I had never been on an airplane, and I didn't even really believe that Europe existed at that time. I was so country. It's like I was so Bama. I was so country that I didn't think that Europe existed until I got there.
Yeah.
In books and stuff like that. Because my family didn't have a lot of money and everything, and I was driving back and forth from New York to Chicago. I wasn't flying. And so when I went down there and Thad, I kept bugging Thad, man. I was like standing by the pillow in the Vanguard, and I just kept it. And he called everybody Booger. So he said, Booger, I'm tired of you vibing me. Why don't you just bring your horn down? And so I had auditioned in Chicago, so he already knew that I could play.
Right.
So I came down and subbed and played the whole night. They were doing 3 sets by then. You got through at the middle of the night. And so after the gig, Mel Lewis, who was doing all the business, he was the business person of the band.
Mm-hmm.
He walked up to me and said, "So you're gonna join the band or what?" And I was shocked, because I thought I was just sitting in, and I was like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, I wasn't doing anything. I was playing on the street. So I was like, yeah. And so then he said, okay, here's our itinerary. We got a 10-week Europe. You got to get a passport. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, I was like shocked, So wow. I called my mother in the middle of the night, right from the Vanguard, in Chicago. And I woke her up and I was like, I made the big time. Thad Jones hired me. I'm going to Europe. I shook up the world. I was like, Ali, and she was like, man. Oh, that's nice. Call me later when I'm awake. Boom. It's like, And I was so
oh
excited.
Man, that's beautiful, man.
That was the thing that I wanted to do. That was it.
You were driven, man. That's one of the things I love about you. Like I said, it seems like you came to New York with a mission, a mindset. You didn't care what you had to do. Hey, if I have to sleep on the street or whatever, I'm going to make it and I'm going to do this. And then you get exposed to all these giants, these musicians, man, of the caliber of people that you were hanging with at such a young age. I mean, it had to have a tremendous effect on you. I was interested also after working with Thad, man. I think you played with the Cecil Taylor big band. What was it like working with Cecil, man?
Yeah, that was a trip. Cecil's. See, all these guys are like, they're so individual. I mean, each one is like a character. You can make a movie about any one of them. They each a character. So Cecil was one of these really eccentric kind of guys. I mean, he's eccentric. That's the only way you can describe him. And so he's like Mr. Coleman. He has this whole weird way of. You
got the voice down pat too, man.
Yeah. And so he hired me to do a big band gig with him at a place called Lush Life on Bleecker Street for a whole month, in I think it was in '82, And so so I played this gig. I didn't know what to expect. I knew he was, kind of crazy, but I didn't know what to expect. I knew his music was out there and everything, but I wanted to play with everybody. I wanted to play with all these masters. I knew he was like one of these masters. So I was like, okay, let me find out what this cat's about. Because every time I did this, I was surprised, by who I played with. And so when I started playing with him, the thing that killed me the most was the rehearsals, man. He had these rehearsals that were like 8 hours long, where he was just dictating. It was no music written. He was it's a big band now. And he's dictating the music from the piano and you had to get it by ear, and he's giving everybody their part and everything. I was like, this is crazy. We're never going to get this. And then the process turned out so well that that's what I do now. I mean, I got that from him. I was like, man, I'm gonna steal this. This is great. Great because I like the way it turned out. It was like this almost African oral transmission kind of thing in the way that he taught the music to us, which was different than I was used to with Thad and all those guys. They had everything written out, you know, and you had to read good and all this kind of stuff. His thing was like totally by ear, and it was almost like this tribal kind of thing, you know, the way he did things. And I liked the way it came out, and I was like, I'm gonna take from that, you know, I'm gonna use that.
You know, Steve, when I found out that you played with him, the first thing that popped into my mind, I said, you know, something that would have been interesting to hear Steve Coleman and Albert Ayler together playing. I would have loved for the two of you guys to have hooked up and done something, man. You know, I mean, of course, he died like in 1970, but it would have been interesting just to hear you two do something together, you know?
The closest I got to that is I played with Milford Graves, who's it was his drummer, and Milford's one of my mentors too. So that's, you know, I mean, so I was channeling Albert through him. He told me a lot of stories about Albert and different things, and he's a big influence on me too. Milford Graves, a drummer named Doug Hammond, you know, Tommy Turrentine, who did big name, Stanley's brother, but he really influenced me a lot, you know. There's a guy named George Braith who plays this like double horn and stuff like this. You know, all these guys influenced me, and some of them are famous, like Sonny Rollins and people like this, and some of them aren't, you know. But for me, they're all like just as important, you know. I mean, so I would go up to Sonny Rollins' house and spend the whole night with him, you know, all night. He would just tell me these stories about all. I mean, it was like I was on cloud nine, man. You know, when I first got to New York, Max Roach invited me to his house, you know, and he told me all these stories like all night. He was telling me all this stuff about Charlie Parker and these Mingus and all these cats he played with, you know. And it was just, I was like this, man. I was just, you know, because incredible guys I have on records and everything. And all of a sudden I'm sitting like in their living room, you know. I mean, you know, whatever. Right. It was a big deal to me to meet Dizzy Gillespie, to meet Max Roach, to meet all these people, you know, to sit next to Frank West, you know, Frank Foster, you know, Johnny Griffin. I mean, just everybody. You know, sit in with Art Blakey, you know, talk to McCoy Tyner. It was like I was like in heaven talking to these people. Play with Rashid Ali, you know. And so for me, this was the education. This was like the real education. I mean, I didn't learn any of this stuff when I was well, school didn't come close to. First of all, I didn't go to one of these Berkeley type schools, you know. So I didn't go to a place where they taught improvisation or anything like this. I never took an improvisation lesson. I just hung around these guys and then learned what, you know, from what they were doing. And they were like great musicians. I mean, all singers like Abbey Lincoln, you know.
I was about to ask you about her, man. What was it like working with Abbey? Wow.
It was fantastic, man. She's one of my main mentors. It was fantastic. And because it was I wanted to work with Abbey or Betty, you know. I mean, I wanted to, they're the same age, from the same era and everything, and I wanted to work with one of them, you know. And I saw Abbey at a place called Sweet Basil's. I'd seen her before at the Vanguard, but I was too shy to say anything, you know. She was like my mother's age, and I was just too shy, you know. So, but I saw her again at Sweet Basil's in the early 80s. And I went up to her and I said, Miss Lincoln, my name is Steve Coleman, and you're one of my favorite singers, you know, like this. And she said, oh, that's nice, young man, you know. And I didn't have my horn with me at the time. She said, you must be a musician. And I said, yes, ma'am, I play saxophone, you know. And so she said, I got a feeling about you. Why don't you just bring your horn down tomorrow and play with me? I was like, wow. I was like, because she didn't even know if I could play, right? You know.
Wow.
Like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, I'm sure, you know. And so I came down and played, and it went great. And then she said, you're wonderful. Can you get me a band? Can you put together a band for me? I was like, yes, ma'am, I think I can, you know. And so I called the cat I've been playing with, Mark Johnson and Billy Johnson, I had been playing on street with, you know. And then I added a brother I knew named James Weidman, who, you know, I mean, he played in my group later, but James Weidman knew a lot of songs, and he had a great knowledge of the compositions and everything, you know. And so I put that band together for her. And then we went on to make a record and all this kind of stuff. And that's when my relationship with her started. And it went through the 90s, you know, I mean, 80s and the 90s, you know.
Beautiful, beautiful. Also, Steve, I noticed, I guess right around that time, other musicians started coming to you. Now, how did you meet Cassandra Wilson? Because you guys have a really good thing. You guys go way back. And I had Cassandra on the show. We talked about you. We brought up, you know, Henry Thedgill and some other people who are geniuses. But I put you in that same class too, man. But how'd you meet Cassandra?
Me and Graham, this goes back to Graham. Me and Graham decided that we were going to hitchhike through the South. My father was petrified because he was scared of the South, you know. I mean, so we decided, this was like 81 or something like this, right? We decided we're going to hitchhike through the South and go in search of the blues. You know, we want the Delta blues, you know. Now, yes, they had a lot of blues in Chicago and everything, but we wanted to go through Mississippi, through Alabama and New Orleans, you know, I mean, Tennessee, you know, all these places, you know. and we wanted to see for ourselves what was happening. And we wanted to travel around. We didn't have any money, so we had no choice but to hitchhike, which my father said was like a death wish. It's like, I mean, because being an older black cat, he was afraid of the South, and so,
Right.
all the stuff that he had seen and everything. And so, and my family, my grandparents moved up from the South to escape that, what was happening in the South and everything. And here I was saying I wanted to go through and hitchhike, and he was like, "You crazy," And so me and Graham hitchhiked to the South. So we started off in Chicago, we hitchhiked, and we went down to the bottom of Illinois, and then we hit all the major cities. We first went to Memphis, Tennessee, and then after Memphis, we went to Jackson, Mississippi, which is where Cassandra's from. I didn't know Cassandra, she had just left and gone and moved to New York, So everybody was telling me, "Oh, you just missed our homegirl. You're gonna like her. She's a great singer, blah, blah, blah. She just left here to go to New York. You just missed her, blah, blah." So we heard this. And so I was like, okay, who is this woman, And so then we went to New Orleans. We met Wynton's father and all these people, and Alvin Baptiste and all those cats down there and everything.
Right.
So then we came back to Jackson. Then we started going east. And we went to Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia. We met the Harper brothers and all that. And then finally we went up to New York for 3 months. It took a long time because 2 black guys don't get picked up very often hitchhiking, Make a list, right? So we finally got back to New York, right? And I got back just in time to do a Charlie Parker tribute. Somebody hired me for a Charlie Parker tribute that involved 3 alto players. It was me, Gerald Hayes, I think it was, and Frank Strozier, Frank Strozier from Memphis, And so, and I was the youngest cat on the thing, So they hired us and we did this gig at a place, I think it was called Green Street or Green, something like that. I think it was called Green Street. It was in Soho, So Cassandra came. I didn't know her then. I didn't know she was the same person. So she was in the audience and everything. So so she walked up to us and she said, "Can I sit in with you guys?" And so I looked at her, I was like, "Well, can you?" I mean, it's like, and she said, "Yes, I know music. I can sit in, blah, blah, blah." And so we said, "Okay, what do you want? What do you want to sing?" And she said, "I want to sing Opera Vive, like Charlie Parker, and blah, 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 And so we said, "Okay, fine, Opera Vive. Okay, good." So she sang it. She sang the melody, she scattered and everything. And we were like, "Wow, that's, you're good, She said, "What else you want to do?" She said, "I want to do Cherokee." And that shocked us,
That's
right?
the one that she and I talked about, because that song is almost impossible to sing, but yeah, we talked about Cherokee, man. That
sing the melody, which most singers can do, but she improvised off of it. And she started like improvising through the chain. And we were like, whoa, So then me and her around the same age. So we started talking and we talked all night. We sat in my car. I remember this. And we talked all night about stuff. And she's telling me, "Well, Bird's the word and blah, 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 blah." I was like, "Yeah, I'm a Charlie Parker fanatic too." I was like, "But we got to develop our own music. We can't copy what they did. They did that already." I was like, we have to develop what we're doing and everything. And so she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Well, we're rehearsing in this basement in Harlem. Why don't you come by and, come by and join in the rehearsal and we'll show you what we're doing, whatever, So she started coming by. And then at the time I had already formed my group 5 Elements, so she came by and she listened to us and everything. This was like some early M-bass stuff,
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, you think you could try this and sing this and everything?" She said, "I don't know. This is kind of weird." I was like, "It's weird, but it's singable." And so she told me my music wasn't singable. So then I took one of the songs and sang it myself. And I was like, "Now your voice is way better than mine. If I can sing it, you can sing it." I was like, And so then she started. I introduced her to Abbey, who she didn't know at the time. She knew who she was, but she didn't know her, and she fell in love with Abbey. I introduced her to there was a Bunky Green tune that she liked, called "Little One, I'll Miss You," that she sang on my first album and everything, That was a fight getting Cassandra on my album because the guy who produced the record, he didn't want Cassandra and Graham to be on the album, and I was like, "These people are going to be great in the future. What do you mean you don't want them?" It's like, so you're going to regret this, And so anyway, I paid her from my own pocket and everything, and I had her on the album. I told him, I said, "I'm not making an album unless I can use these people." Because he wanted me to use different people. I wanted to use Lonnie Plexico, Jerry Allen, and Marvin Smitty Smith, and all of them were unknown except Jerry. Jerry had a little name, but nobody knew Lonnie and nobody knew Smitty, And so the guy was like, "I don't know them." I was like, "They're gonna be great in the future." I was like, "You will know them." It's like I said, "I want to use this woman, Cassandra Wilson." He said, "Singers, I don't know her." I was like, you're gonna regret this if I said, "You're gonna regret this because this woman's gonna be famous one day." I was like, so you better. I was like, just because you don't know somebody, there's a first time for everything, So I got all them together, and that was the album. It was Jerry, Smitty, and Lonnie was the rhythm section, and then I added Cassandra and Graham. You know, I mean, and so that was my first record that we did and everything. You know, and we were all hanging around each other. We were all, you know, I had met Jerry through another guy named Dwayne Armstrong. You know, who's a Chicago cat. I had met her. And then I went over her house and we played all day and everything. She showed me all of her boxes of music and we started talking. I was talking about Von Freeman. She was talking about Marcus Belgrave. We were talking about the difference between Detroit and Chicago and all this kind of stuff, you know. And we were around this, all of us are like around the same age. Like Cassandra, me, Jerry, we were like 1 year apart, you know, like just like that.
Yeah.
Talking and everything. I introduced Jerry to Cassandra and they hooked up and it was just, they were just young musicians who had a lot of talent. Just a lot of talent. You know what's incredible to me, Steve, just you remind me so much of Miles Davis in the sense of being a great band leader and looking at musicians and knowing what they can do, you know, maybe before other people can see it. You know, some people say, oh, you know, Steve, you need to use someone else. Like, no, trust me, these people are good. They're going to be good or famous in the future. And it's like you knew how to put the right mix of right people together. But one of the things that's fascinating about you, man, that I love is you started taking a lot of trips. You started traveling a lot, man, going to like Ghana, India, different places. And over there, when you were there, that music must have really affected you, man, because you came back and the stuff that you started playing just went to a whole new level. You know, when I first heard Rhythm People, when you came out with that, I think in 1990, blew me away, man. I'm like, what? I says, where's Steve coming from? Man, this is just so different. Nobody sounds like this. And I started reading about you, you know, how you were, I guess in the 80s, 90s, you were taking trips and traveling and stuff and really getting, you know, sucked into like that culture, man. And you were being exposed to it. And you applied this to your music, man, which was just like, wow, I was blown away, man. I really was blown away. But tell me, what were you sort of looking for when you were taking those trips? What was it that you were looking for? Did you have in mind, okay, I want to do something different with this music. Maybe I need to go back to my roots and I just want to explore some cultures or check this out and see what I can take, you know, and apply it to my music. What was your mindset at that time? It's bigger than music.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I had a great teacher for African American studies, you know, a great teacher. His name was Mr. Howard, you know, and he introduced us to, I didn't know anything about Africa or what had happened in the lineage of what Black people had done. I didn't know anything beyond slavery, you know. I mean, that's what was taught to us before. And so he went way beyond that. And he started us off with this book by Chancellor Williams called The Destruction of Black Civilization, you know. And from that book, that was like the seed that everything just expanded, because I found out about the empires of Ghana and Songhai, Mali, and you know, Kush and all these places and stuff like that. I was like, oh wow, Black people have done a lot. They've been here a long time, you know. And I mean, and this wasn't all that was taught to us earlier was, you know, the apple, somebody cutting down the apple tree, and I cannot tell a lie, and all this stuff with George Washington and Abe Lincoln and all these people. That was the history that was taught to us before that. And he was like, no, you come from a great people that have a great history. There were empires in Zimbabwe. There were empires in Nile Valley, you know, kind of stuff, you know. So he taught us about all these things. And I still have that book. It's real tattered and everything, but I still have that same. And from that, I had this idea like, wow, so this is almost like a Wakanda kind of thing. Like there's this, like these fantastic civilizations. What was the music like? You know, that's the first thing I thought, you know. And so I determined that from there, that sprouted, and Cassandra was into this too. She was into all this ancient Kemetic stuff, Egyptian and all this kind of stuff, you know. So we used to talk about all these things. And then Jerry was into it. And they, you know, she'd wear all these African clothes and all this kind of stuff, you know. So we talked about this, and Lonnie's into it, you know. And so we were very, very interested in the cultural aspect, and people don't realize that the music is just a culture and sound. That's all it is. You know, it's like a sonic representation of the culture. So the same things that you see with Michael Jordan or Muhammad Ali or whatever, and you see in the music, you know, it's the same thing. In fact, Roy Haynes told me that back then, segregation was happening, all of them lived around each other, you know. So Sugar Ray's Club and then Duke Ellington would be around the corner and all this kind of stuff, you know, they all lived around each other. And he said that they would, sometimes they would practice like Sugar Ray might use a drummer to spar to, you know, or something like this, you know. So they would come over and have, you know, a tap dancer or something like this, you know. So I mean, the culture was closer, you know. I mean, there were more interchanges and things like this, you know. And I'm a big boxing fan, So whenever Roy talked to me about boxing and stuff like that, I'd be like this. I'd be listening, you know, because my father introduced me to boxing first Ali Liston fight, you know, and so I've been in it since that point. I got hooked in, you know, and so so that's sort of what hooked me in. And then I told myself, when I get enough money, when I get stable enough, I'm gonna go to these places. Because see, normally when you tour, we're just touring Europe, Canada, United States, Japan, maybe something like this, you know. But you're not going to Mali, you're not going to Cote d'Ivoire, like Ivory Coast or Ghana, or like this, you know, Cuba, you know. And so I wanted to go to all these places that I wasn't going to, and I knew I was gonna have to do it on my own. And here's the thing that inspired me. Coltrane never went to Africa, even though he was intensely interested in Africa. Never went to Africa, you know. So I was like, if these brothers didn't go to Africa and they were like pretty successful, I'm not gonna go if I just sit and wait, you know. So I have to follow the lead of people like Don Cherry, Randy Weston, you know, Ed Blackwell, and some of these cats who, you know, they just took the initiative to go to these places, you know. And Henry Threadgill, he just got up and went to India, you know. I mean, so I use them as my models. I talked to Threadgill, you know. I talked to Rollins, because Sonny Rollins did this sabbatical where he went to India and all this kind of stuff, yoga and all. And so I talked to him. I called him up. I said, well, man, what did you do when you went there? How did you do it? You know, I mean, I talked to him, and he was very gracious. You know, he told me, he's like, well, this is what I was thinking at that time, and this of it, and these are the kind of things I did and everything. So I would interview people and talk to them, not a formal interview, but just talk to them, you know. And, they were my mentors, you know, and then I would use that information. So the information that Rollins gave me, that Threadgill gave me, I'm watching Randy Weston and Don Cherry and all these cats, you know, I mean, that made a big impact on me because I saw how it impacted their music. I saw it. I mean, I saw the suites that they were doing and stuff like this. I saw how Randy was working with the Ganao musicians and all this kind of stuff. You know, I saw all the stuff that Don Cherry did his whole life. As a matter of fact, me and Graham just talked about Don Cherry, you know, and he was talking about what a big influence Don Cherry was on him. He was closer to Cherry than I was because they're both cornet players, you know. I mean, so he was talking about what a big influence Cherry was on him and how Cherry traveling to all these places inspired him and all this kind of stuff. And it inspired me too, you know. So we were always inspired by these people. I would talk to Jerry Allen. She would talk about Mary Lou Williams and her Zodiac suite and all this kind of stuff. And so that got us all into this esoteric. Wow, she wrote a suite about the Zodiac. What's happening with that? You know, and so you know, we just that whole scene, and all these guys had really done what we were trying to do before, and people before them did it too, but in different ways. You know, I mean, our history is very, very rich. You know, you can go back to cats like one of the things I do is I get books written by musicians, like autobiographies and everything. You know, so there's this cat named Wilbur Sweatman. He's like a clarinet player who was born in like something like 1882 or something like this, you know, I mean, right? 1882, because he's a friend of James Reese Europe. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Oh, of course I have, yes.
James Europe, I think, was born in 1881, you know, so they were friends and they were in the same clubs together and everything. And in his book, he's talking about these arguments he's having with Jelly Roll Morton and all these kind of things, you know. And so I'm eating this stuff up. I'm reading this stuff because they're talking about, like, you know, when I went to New Orleans in 1906, blah, blah, you know, they're talking all this stuff, you know. And I'm like, oh man, this is great. You know, it's like, you know, because it's firsthand, you know, it's firsthand stuff, you know. Rex Stewart, you know, he wrote a book called Boy Meets Horn, I think is the name of the book. You know, he played with Duke Ellington, Rex Stewart, and he's got some great. I introduced his stuff to Graham and Jonathan Finlayson, the young cat that plays with me in my band. You know, so I was like, check out this book, man. This cat's telling all these stories about when he's on the train with Duke and then these different things and stuff. I was like, this is what we need, man. We need information about this time period from the musicians. You know, when Arthur Taylor's book came out, Notes and Tones, I was all on top of that. Yeah, I got it like right away because he was interviewing the cats. He was interviewing Betty Carter and Max Roach and all these people, you know. I mean, I was Dizzy's book. We waited for Dizzy's book to come out in late 70s. He wrote a book called To Be or Not to Bop, you know. And we were like, this is the first major cat to write a book from that era, you know, because Charlie Parker, Monk and them cats, they didn't talk, you know. That was the thing. They were famous for not talking, you know. And so I was like, this guy's writing a book, and we waited. It came out in 1979, and as soon as it came out, I ran down, you know. And I was like devouring it. I was like, man, this is the shit, you know. Like, it's like, you know, man, I was so excited. I'm still excited, you know. I can,
man, your energy is beautiful, man. I can see it in you. Hey, during that time period, was the music of someone like Sun Ra, was it influential in your life?
I almost joined Sun Ra's band, except for one thing.
Oh, what happened?
They tried to recruit me, right? There was a cat named Noel. I can't remember his first name. His next Texas name is Noel, but it's Noel. He says like we were running the jam sessions, and so he said, well, you want to join Sun Ra, man? I can introduce you with Ra and everything. And I knew about Sun Ra from Vaughn, because Vaughn had played with Sun Ra like years ago, back when he was Sonny Blunt, And so I was like, yeah, so what's happening with it? Tell me about it and everything. He said, well, you got to live in this house in Philly with everybody. I was like, oh, okay. I started getting, and so he said, he don't allow no girls. You can't have no girls. I was like, well, that's it for me. I was like, you said the one thing, because he started telling me these rules, and I was like, nah.
Oh man,
I was a hard-headed cat, man. For a guy who had no gigs.
Steve, you're funny. You're a funny cat. Hey, man, I wanted to ask you about something that happened to you, very special, about 7-8 years ago, that MacArthur Fellowship, man. Tell me, what was it like getting that? Because I'm sure when you got that call, you were probably like, okay, come on, this is a joke, right? I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah, I thought it was a joke. They called me up. I was right here. They called me up and the phone rang and I didn't recognize the number. So I almost didn't answer it. Because, sometimes when you don't recognize it, even when you just call, I didn't see your number. I was like, I don't know. It's probably spam. I was like, so I didn't recognize the number. And then I said, well, it's from Chicago. Let me pick up. It might be something about my family. That's the thing. Because my almost all of my family still lives in Chicago. So I thought, I don't know, maybe somebody got sick or something, so I better pick up. So I picked up. And they said, Steve Coleman? I was like, yes. They said, well, we're from the MacArthur Foundation. And everything. And they started telling me. And I was like, because I know a lot of practical jokers, people who call and imitate things and stuff like this. And I was like, how do I know that you guys are who you are? And they said, well, we'll name you who is on the board and you can get on Google and look it up and see, blah, blah, blah. So they did that. I looked on the internet and I was like, wow, it's them, because I figured a practical joker wouldn't know all this information.
Right.
And so then they told me that I got it and everything. And I was shocked, because we always joked about getting grants like that. And I wasn't the kind of cat that got a lot of awards at the time.
Right.
I didn't get a lot of awards. And that year I got 3, I applied for a Guggenheim, which I didn't think I was getting, and I got it, and then I got something called the Doris Duke Artist Impact Award, and then I got the MacArthur. After that, that was the 3rd one. So I was shocked, but I had these ideas about these big projects that I wanted to do, and I had a dream earlier that I thought that Prince, who was alive back then, I thought Prince was going to fund my projects, whatever. That didn't happen. But then the person who I told the dream to, he decided to, he talked me into applying for the Guggenheim, which I did. And so the Guggenheim, then the Doris Duke, then the MacArthur came back to back. I'm gonna tell you a funny story about the MacArthur. Sonny Rollins calls me on the phone, and he said, Steve, this is Sonny. I just like to. He has a certain kind of voice, He's like, right. I just want to congratulate you for getting the MacArthur, man. That's great. I heard it on the radio. Blah 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 blah. So I was like, oh, Sonny, it's great to hear from you and everything. And so he said, I just want to be the first to tell you that award doesn't mean shit.
Are you serious? He said that?
Yes, and my mouth was hanging open, right? And so he kept talking. He's like, you still have to do the work, man. You're the same person that you are now as you were before the award. He said, I've gotten many awards. Presidents have hung things around my neck. He said, they don't mean shit. He said, none of them have ever written any music. There's no award that's written one piece of music, So he was trying to make sure I didn't get the big head.
Yeah.
So he was like, that award, man, it can help you get some gigs and maybe you can put some food on the table. But outside of that, man, you still got to do the work that you got to do. And that award doesn't mean shit. I'm just telling you, And so I was like, so then I got what he was trying to say to me, and I was like, all right, because, this was Sonny Rollins. He had gotten millions of awards, he had gotten all kinds of stuff and everything. He started talking to me about how people will start telling you you're good and you're great and all this kind of stuff. He said, you can't listen to that. You can't listen. You have to look in the mirror and you have to keep working and you have to know what you're trying to do. And you can't listen to he said there was one point in the late 50s where they were telling him he was the next Charlie Parker and he was great. He said, man, I didn't listen to any of that shit. He's like, I just kept developing, whatever. Because he said that would ruin you. That was like some of the great, it's the way he delivered it though that was shocking. Because it came out of nowhere,
Yeah.
So that's one of the experiences that I will never forget. His response to me about the MacArthur was different than everybody else's response. I mean, but he's Sonny Rollins, right?
He's
So I
Sonny
mean,
Rollins.
that's I have to listen. I have to hang on every word he's saying, right?
What an incredible story, man! You also played along with Bunky Green too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what was it like working alongside with Bunky?
After Von Freeman, I think Bunky and Von were my two biggest influences in Chicago.
Yeah.
Bunky from Milwaukee originally, but he was in Chicago when I was there. I used to follow him around and tape him, follow Von around and tape them and everything. I bugged Bunky for lessons. I bugged Von for lessons. They would never give me lessons. I bugged them, because I was mad at Bunky because he was teaching a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who was in the school that he went to the school that Bunky was teaching at. And I was like, man, you teaching Glenn? How come you won't teach me? He was like, you don't need lessons. You just need to keep working and blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm asking you for lessons. What do you mean I don't need lessons? I'm asking you, it's like, stuff I don't know. He's like, no, you just need to move to New York. You don't need lessons. You can already play, blah, 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 blah. So he wouldn't teach me. It pissed me off then, man, because this is like one of my favorite saxophone players. Von Freeman was the same thing. He would not teach me. He just said, no, you just need to keep hanging out. Just keep coming around. Just keep listening. I was like, what's wrong with these dudes? It's like, that's what I was thinking at the time, because at the time I just thought, well, you take lessons from people,
I guess that was their way of teaching, for you to learn, they have a different approach. And of course, his son, Chico, is also a fantastic player as well. Now, you're also, I'm sorry.
That's who Chico's the one that introduced me to Sam Rivers.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're also an educator too, man. Is that something that you enjoy doing? Are you still teaching like online, like Berkeley? I think you were at Berkeley, right?
No, that was Osby. I wasn't
Osby.
teaching.
Okay.
Yeah. I taught at UC Berkeley. Maybe that's what you mean.
That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
UC Berkeley out in California. I taught there for a year and a half. I was a professor there, and that was a gig that some cats hooked me up with. I mean, it told me about George Lewis was the first cat that told me about the position. He's another Chicago cat, trombonist, AACM guy and everything. So George is a big influence on me also, and he's also a guy that helped me out and everything. And I thought he was a genius, to him, Threadgill, all those cats, I just thought that they were like Muhal. I said, these cats are geniuses, it's like, and so they helped me out a lot, just because I was younger than them and they were just trying to help out the next cat in line and stuff like that. So George said, well, man, you should think about, I was doing a sabbatical based on Sonny Rollins' sabbatical. I was going to do a sabbatical for like 18 months.
18 months.
And I told George about it, and George said, well, why don't you get a position teaching, a research position, and then you can be making money doing research and do your sabbatical, I was like, I don't know about teaching, man, in the university, that structure and everything. He said, well, just try it out, man. There's this place out in California that's looking for somebody and everything. He said, I think you'll get the gig, And so he kept pushing me, to apply, And so I applied and I got the gig. I was shocked, because see, here's the thing. Here's why I was shocked. I don't have a bachelor's. I never even finished college. I took 3 years and dropped out and started going to clubs and stuff like this, And so I told him, I was like, how can I get a position as a college professor at basically what's an Ivy League school? Because out there, that's Ivy League, Stanford, UC Berkeley, without having a degree. He said, because of what you've done in the field. He said,
right.
He said, because of the work, he said that work is valuable. And then he told me about Max Roach and Yusef Lateef and all these cats who got gigs, because of who they were, Cecil Taylor, and stuff like this. He said, they will give you credit for the work that you've done, what they call in the field. I mean, that's what they call it, the academic cats, right? They said, whereas other people have to go through this dissertations and, get their bachelor's and master's and doctorate and all this. They said, you don't have to necessarily do that because you've actually done the things that they're studying, So that is like, that experience is like, so he said, I think you'll get the gig based on that, even though you're going up against all these other people who have PhDs and stuff like this, and then I ended up getting the gig, so that's how that happened. But then I felt really, really restricted by the structure of the place, and they kind of wanted me to stop touring as much and everything. I was like, no, I can't stop playing. I mean, that's what got me here. I was like, I can't stop doing that and everything. So we had clash, and I decided to leave because of that. But it was a great experience though, because I didn't know anything about academia at that time, especially from a teaching standpoint. And I also learned how to do research while I was there. They had great libraries and everything, and I learned how to do research. So now when I did my travels, I was able to extend those research skills to like the places that I traveled to. I mean, how to look things up, how to, you know, I got how to go to libraries and how to get, I learned that you can get dissertations, you know, that were, you know, like a lot of books before they were published and everything are published as dissertations. And I can go and get access to these dissertations. There was this group called UMI that put out all these, I learned all that at the school, you know, because the other professors taught me all these different things, the ethnomusicologists, the composers, and all the people who were there. I would question them, you know. There was a guy named Ali Wilson, a Black composer who was there, you know. He was teaching Tony Williams at the time. Tony Williams was taking classical lessons with him, you know, I mean, like writing, composition, and everything. Yeah. So I would ask him, and I would ask him questions. I would ask him, like, what are you teaching Tony, and what, you know, I mean, so stuff like this. He told me about all the great Black classical composers, you know, and there's a tradition of that and everything. I didn't know about that. I mean, there's just so much stuff that I learned from there that I'm grateful that I did it, you know, and I could do it again if the situation was right, you know, but it has to be the right situation where I'm allowed the flexibility to do what I want to do, you know, because it's a lot of work. You have a lot of responsibility, and you have responsibility to the students and everything. And it's, you know, and I want to do it right. I don't want to just do it halfway, you know.
Yeah, exactly, Steve. Hey, I was going to ask you, man, when you're at home just relaxing, chilling, you know, when you're maybe not touring, which not too many people are doing right now because of COVID. What is Steve Coleman? What is Steve Coleman listening to, man? What are you checking out when you're at home? Do you put maybe some Bird on or some Parliament Funkadelic? Or I'm just curious, what do you listen to when you're at home, man?
Well, I'm always listening to the Black music that comes from my culture. I'm always listening to that. Yeah. But in addition, I'm listening to music from other places. You know, I mean, I'm listening to music from the Caribbean, from Haiti. You know, I'm listening to stuff that comes out of Brazil. I'm listening to a lot of things that come from Africa. You know, I'm listening to stuff that's European. You know, I mean, there's certain European composers I like. I'm listening to stuff from India, from Indonesia. You know, from China, from Korea. You know, I mean, I'm listening to Vietnam. I heard some stuff recently that was like hip. You know. So I'm listening, I'm always checking out music from other places, and I'm checking out also the history of these places, you know, and stuff like this. So, but I would say that I'm influenced by the music of the tradition of Black Americans, you know, I could say that, you know. I mean, I view that whole tradition as one body of work. I don't separate like the blues and the jazz, and I don't do that, you know. It's one body of work that has different emphasis, you know. So it might be Ma Rainey, it might be Bessie Smith, it might be B.B. King, Muddy Waters, it might be Charlie Parker, it might be Lester Young, it might be James Brown, Stevie Wonder. You know, for me, all that big body of work, you know, look at all of that as being valuable. You know, the earliest record I have, I mentioned him earlier, is a record from James Reese Europe in 1913. That's the earliest recording that I have of anything. And even then, I could hear the African elements in the music, the claves and things like this, you know, that were there. This is 1913. This is before this whole original Dixieland jazz band thing and all that stuff from New Orleans. You know, this is very early. James Reese Europe, that was an East Coast group, you know. And so I'm intensely interested in the history of the music. That's why I know when everybody's born and all this kind of stuff. You know, I'm into that aspect because I want to know when things happened, what was happening technology-wise, why did they do what they did, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And so, like Duke Ellington's influenced by two guys, and one of the guys that he's influenced by, one cat's name is Will Vaudrey, and the other guy's name is Will Marion Cook. And Will Marion Cook, these are mentors of Duke Ellington's, right? Duke Ellington's born 1899, you know, and these cats are older than him. Will Marion Cook was he was an assistant to Antoine Dvorak, who was a classical composer, you know. I mean, and so Dvorak had a Black assistant, Cook, who mentored Duke Ellington, you know. And so I'm always interested in these kind of connections. I'm like, okay, so how's Duke able to get these colors and everything? Oh, okay, he checked out these guys, you know. I mean, right? And then I find interviews of them, and they say how we, you know, I taught Duke this or I taught Duke that about colors and different things like this and everything, you know. So that guy Wilbur Sweatman that I mentioned, the clarinet player, he hired Duke Ellington and Sonny Greer when they were really, really young. You know, really, before Duke formed his band, he was one of the first cats to give them a break and hire them. So just knowing stuff like that and knowing that there's a continuum, and you know, each cat is like there's something before them. There's always something before them. Charlie Parker's following around, you know, Don Byas, you know, and Don Byas influenced by this and that, you know. And so I'm always going back and looking at that so that I can get a clear picture of what the lineage is and why the guys played what they played. you know. And I'm not the only one interested. I mean, Jerry Allen was like, for example, she was really intensely interested in that. She studied like all the great Black female musicians, you know, who would, you know, the Vi Rez, the Melba Listons, the Mary Lou Williams, and all these people, you know, the Louis Armstrong's wife, Lil Hardin, and all these people, you know. I said Vi Red, right? There's a woman in Detroit, Terry Pollock, I think is her name, you know, plays the piano, fantastic player, you know. So a lot of this stuff gets lost in history, you know, but there's been some great people in this music, very, really talented. Some of them we know, and some of them we know less. You know, the Bunky Greens and the Von Freemans are not so well known. I happen to be where they're active, and so therefore I know them. You know, but that's a accident, you know, or whatever. I don't know what you call it, but I happen to be born there. So I mean, so Von Freeman, man, I got so many recordings, private recordings of Von Freeman, you wouldn't believe it, because I heard this cat like every week for years. You know, and I was bringing my big tape recorder and recording him and everything and stuff like that. So this woman, you know Lakeisha Benjamin? You ever heard of her?
Name sounds familiar.
Alto player, she's coming up. Lonnie's in her band. You know, she's coming up, good alto player. You know, so I was telling her about Von Freeman. You know, and she was like, "Well, how can I find?" I was like, "She said, how can I find the recordings?" I was like, you know, because she calls me Mr. Coleman, like, Mr. Coleman, how can I find the recordings? You know, and everything. I said, look, I'll send you some stuff. You know, but because I mean, you can't find what I have, because I have so much stuff that I personally recorded. I was like, you can't find this. It's nowhere, you know. I said, I'll send you a bunch of stuff and everything. And, you know, so I'm introducing the people to that and everything. And they're, you know, it's great, man, because it's like, all you have to do is keep your ears open, keep your eyes open, and talk, communicate with people. And there's so much information out here. I mean, you know, it's amazing. And we're all like one big kind of, it's like a community, you know, that we get things from, you know, and everything. So I just feel grateful that I can go and sit and I can call Billy Hart up and talk to him on the phone. I just had Billy on the show like a week ago, man. So yeah. He's one of my mentors. He's one of the cats. You know, I talk to him. He starts telling me about the drum set and how it was invented and this and that. I mean, he starts telling me all these stories, you know. And him playing with Wes Montgomery and this and that, you know. And he said, man, Coltrane asked me to join his band, but I was scared, you know. And I was like, wow, you know. And so I'm listening to him. Then I'm calling up Gary Bartz, and he's talking his shit, you know, to me. And he's telling me all the stories about, you know, when he first heard training him at the Vanguard and all this kind of stuff, you know. Then I talked to Milford telling me these stories. So to me, those guys, those particular guys I just mentioned, they were all born around 1940. Charles McPherson also, he's born in 1939, I think. McPherson, I talked to him too. They're the cats, the bridge cats from my generation. Because my generation is me, Lonnie, Jeff Watts, Branford Marcellus, you know, people like that. But that's Cassandra, Jerry Allen, you know. So that's my generation, Kenny Kirkland, you know. And so that generation, my generation is born between, like, let's say 1955 and 1961 or something like that, right? Okay, their generation is like, starts with like McCoy Tyner, Freddie Hubbard, Booker Little, guys, D. Morgan. They were born all like 1938, right? So from 1938 to 1942, 43, there's another group of cats in there, which I call the bridge cats. I call them the bridge cats because they were the bridge back to Dexter Gordon and Charlie Parker and that era, you know. See, they were the guys that were mentored by those guys, and then we're mentored by them. You know what I'm saying? But through them, I see the other group. It's like a bridge, you know. And so I used to tell Billy, I was like, man, you're like one of the bridge cats for me, you know. I mean, you know, but it's just a matter of when I'm born, you know, because I'm a bridge cat for somebody else. Right. Born 60 for Bob Hurst, or somebody who's born in 64, 65, and David Gilmour, you know, I'm a bridge guy for them, you know, or, you know, and so, or for Craig Taborn or one of these kind of cats, you know, I mean, they're born like at the end of the 60s, and for them, and for me, Billy and them the bridge guy, and for Billy and them, Bird and them are the bridge guys, and it just keeps going back, you know. And so to me, it's beautiful because this chain link that just goes back, and it goes back to like ancient Ghana, ancient Songhai, ancient, you know, it goes back, you know. Now slavery messed things up, you know, obviously, you know, but still, if you go back and study and everything, there's Black people in the diaspora, and what I mean by is in the Americas. You know, all of the Americas, you know, not just the United States, but, you know, the Caribbean, you know, Belize, you know, Brazil, you know, all these places, you know, there's a kind of African retention that happened. There's this kind of like when you see Usain Bolt, when you see Muhammad Ali, when you see Floyd Mayweather, when you see Willie Mays or whatever, you know, there's something that you see, you know, and the musicians also, you know, the entertainers, Fast Waller, all of them. There's something that you see that's a trace from West Africa, mainly West Africa, but not just the Gold Coast. A lot of slaves came from the Gold Coast, but a lot of slaves came from the Congo and all this kind of stuff too. I have this great book that I just got that you should
Oh,
get.
wow.
It's
Let me write that down. You ever read any of John Henry Clark stuff?
Oh yeah.
And there's another brother out of Howard University, Dr. Greg Carr. He's a serious cat, so you should check him out. Yeah.
John Henry Clark. There's this documentary called A Great and Mighty Walk. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, Wesley Snipes produced it.
Okay.
Wesley Snipes was a student of Clark's.
Okay.
And so it's called A Great and Mighty Walk, and it's see, Wesley's in my age group too.
Yeah.
My manager, who was born in 1960, she's been my manager since 1992, a long time now, And so she went to school with Wesley Snipes and with Ving Rhames and all these cats. She went to school with guys, and so so that's that age group, Wesley, like born around 1960, 1961, same as Lonnie and Jeff Watts and all these cats. So all these cats hooked up with Spike Lee and all this kind of, because they're all around the same age group. There was a scene in Brooklyn around Spike and all of us, in that time period, So Wesley told himself that if he ever got some money and later on and everything, he was going to do a documentary on Dr. Clark, which he did. And it's on YouTube. It's called A Great and Mighty Walk.
I got to check that out, man. And I think I did hear something about Wesley Snipes being involved, but yeah, I never saw it. I definitely got to check it out.
St. Clair Bourne. That's the actual guy that filmed it and did it and everything. St. Clair Bourne.
Cool. Man, listen, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on Jazz Talk today. Your wealth of information, and I love your energy, man. I was when I was looking at your background, I said, this cat's almost 65 years old, but he looks like he's in his early 40s. You got like a baby face.
Today I didn't shave.
Yeah. But no, just your energy is beautiful. And just to leave it on this note, the late great, what's the guy's name? The player. We were talking about him earlier. Something that he said to you. You take care of your horn, we'll take care of you.
Oh, Sonny Stitt said that.
Sonny Stitt. Yeah, I love that, man. It was beautiful, but
he said that horn will take you around the world, boy.
And it sure did, man. Well, listen, hang on. I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great Steve Coleman. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.